Good morning and Shabbat Shalom to everybody out there. This is Bill from the Biblical Lifestyle Center in Texarkana, Texas. So I thank you for joining in and letting me come into your home on this Sabbath morning for the Parsha Bo. Parsha number 15. Bo means to come or to go, to make a transition. We'll talk about that in a few moments, hopefully. But I wanted to say blessings to you, good morning to you, good Sabbath to you. And may we all be able to download and receive, embrace, and begin to flow with the holiness, the Kedusha energy of this beautiful seventh day, this Sabbath day that the Creator of the universe designed for mankind and for creation back in Genesis chapter 2 as he began to outlay it for us. Genesis 2 verses 1 through 3 told us he blessed the seventh day and he made it kadosh, holy. He injected, infused holiness energy into this 24-hour period that we experience. May that blessing be upon you. If you're tuning in from wherever you may be, just go ahead and if you would drop your name down in the comment section. If you have a comment, if you have a question, if you have a prayer request, please feel free. And I encourage you to go ahead and put that in there as well. We do review these very carefully. The discussion today will focus, as I said, on Parsha number 15, Parsha Bo. It begins with Exodus 10, verse 1, and continues all the way through chapter 13, the end of the chapter, I believe it's verse 22. And so it contains a lot of material, a lot of things we can discuss. And I just summarized by calling it episode 3, the third episode in the great nation building saga of the Torah. The Torah contains many things. It contains the pathway of life. It contains the way in which the Creator has designed human life on earth to operate in the midst of difficult situations, in the midst of challenges, in the midst of inertia with resistance that we have in our own self. It provides the way. When we talk about the way of the Holy One, Torah provides the way. Well, one of the things that's in the Torah that the Torah contains is one of the most important things is a great nation building saga, a story of how we came to be who we are, of how we came to be called to what we're called to do, how we called to be different from the rest of the world in a way that will honor our Creator and also become a light to the nations that are not part of us, part of our culture, part of our calling, at least at this stage in their lives. So this is episode 3. We've had some previous episodes, Parsha Shemot, the beginning of Exodus. The last week we had Parsha Va'era. If you have not reviewed our teachings on those particular studies, they're online through the YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel. Please feel free, and I encourage you to subscribe to it so you get notifications that it's coming out. But with these two from Parsha Va'era, and Parsha Shemot before that, these two are introductory. These are episodes 1 and 2 in the great nation birthing saga. It all relates back to the promise that the Holy One made to Avram as he began shifting focus into the world, as he began to implement his grand redemptive plan for creation and for mankind. He called Abraham and he said to him, I will make you a blessing and I will bring forth from you a great nation. Well, this is the great nation season. We're building, we're forming, we're birthing this great nation, and this is episode 3. And I call this one Ready or Not. Here we come. I try to give you some perspective on the entire parsha before we go into the details of it in our discussions in this video. So, ready or not, here we come. We're going to become a great nation. We're going to be called to step out of the nation we're in. We're going to be called to birth, like a birth process to take place, whether we're ready or whether we're not. And then we'll see what the issues are with regard to our readiness, the inertia issues. So the great nation is actually going to be expelled from its womb. It's like a baby birthing process. It's a messy process. It involves constriction. It involves limitation. It involves discomfort. Well, both to the mother, to the womb provider, and to the baby that's being born. This is our season, intense season of Parsha Bo, where we are passing through the canal and we are being expelled from the womb. So I try to give you some insight to get you thinking about the parsha before we actually dig into it. The next thing I would have you think about is this story that we're going to read, we're going to discuss in Parsha Bo, is the story we're supposed to tell our children, our sons and our daughters, our children's children. And this is supposed to be told forever and ever, ledor vidor in Hebrew, generation by generation. This is supposed to be the story we're to tell. We're never to let this story out of our mind. It becomes part of our spiritual DNA. This is a part of our identity. This is a part of who you are. This story is so critical. Don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't go through this story with your children, that you shouldn't do what we do, that we shouldn't follow the instructions of the Holy One. This is how we become a holy nation. So tell your children and your children's children, this is how we became a people. This is how we became the people of the Creator of the universe. This is how we became the covenant nation and the chosen people. And this is how we became a people that stands apart from the nations of the world, that stands apart and models the ways of the Holy One to the world and to the nations, and introduces our King's grand redemptive plan for the creation that he has made and so loves. The name of this parsha, the name of our week studies, are very simple. Hebrew, Bet Aleph, Bo. Bet Aleph, say it out loud, pronounce it, is Bo. And it means, usually it's translated to come or to go, but it's not about direction of travel. It is about breaking free of the inertia and the resistance that keeps you where you are. It is about making a transition. So it's to come or it's to go, but whatever it is to move. Not stay where you are, not stay as you are, not stay in the condition you're in, not stay in the circumstances you are in, not stay under the condemnation you are in, not stay under the oppression you are under, not to stay under the addiction you are in, not to stay under the fear that you're in, or the anger or the unforgiveness that you're in, or the emotional trauma that you're in, not to stay there, to get up and boom, to overcome the inertia, overcome the resistance that keeps you locked in that position, and make your move. Come, go, walk, run, leap like a calf released from the stall, skip, but whatever you do, move, don't stay where you are. That's the message of Parsha Bo. It's about preparing for and then honorably executing transition and transcendence. If you're going to be a transcender and overcomer, then you have to learn this passage, this message of Bo, getting free of the inertia, facing and overcoming the inertia challenges, the resistance that is against you. That some of it comes from within yourself and your comfort zones and your fear levels, and other parts come from outside, externally, where they just don't want you to move, and there are forces keeping you in place. So, are you ready to Bo? And what will it take, dear one, to make you let go of your Egypt? What will it take in the world? What will it take in your personal life and your finances? What will it take in the political, economic, social world and milieu around you to make you decide it's time to let go, to break free of your Egypt? Well, in Parsha Bo, we find in the prophesied day of dramatic departure and separation is rapidly approaching. We're going to see that happen. Actually, this is the Parsha in which we leave Egypt. This is the Parsha in which we break free of the inertia. We break free through the resistance, and we head out of the boundaries of this land where we are oppressed and we are hated and we are treated badly and we are mocked, and we are going to a place as better than that. So the prophesied day of dramatic departure and separation is rapidly approaching. The question is, who will go? Who will Bo? Who will get their self together, get the empowerment of the Ruach, the Spirit of the Holy One, and break out of the bindings, break out of the bonds? You think about Joseph, and we talk so much about Joseph being the pattern of the great nation being formed. We're supposed to look like Joseph. We're supposed to talk like Joseph. We're supposed to interact with the world like Joseph. Joseph, of course, as most people in the Western world have come to know him since the King James authors used the J instead of the Y. Well, so who will break free of the bindings of Egypt and our cultural milieu and our social expectations? Who will break free of the economic bondages? Who will break free of the emotional heartstrings and harpoons that the world has thrown at you? Who will overcome the inertia? And who will bow, on the other hand? Who will not break free? Who will not let go? Who will not choose to get up and move? Who will stay behind? Who will just cling to what's familiar and what seems right in their own eyes because it's all you know? Who will choose the enemy you know over the possibilities the creator of the universe has designed and planned for your life? Who will choose? Well, there will be a group that goes. There will be a group that bows. There will be a group, a large group. There will be in the millions. There will be 600,000 Hebrew men, not counting women and children, and not counting the great mixed multitude from all the nations of the world, which said, looked at Egypt at the same time we did and said, there's nothing more for us here. We too will bow. And the great mixed multitude will come out, millions of people, along with the 600,000 Hebrew men and their women. The women went with them and the children. And they will all leave the great first harvest, the first great harvest of Avrahamic Yosephian souls, those who have the spark of the calling of the Holy One upon their life and don't know where they're going, don't even know why they're going, but they have to go, have to bow, because they know they have something more waiting for them on the other side. This is the first great harvest. There will be a great harvest at the end as well. The first great harvest is a harbinger of the second great harvest. It is also the pattern for the second great harvest. Remember that in Genesis 22:17, the Holy One said, blessed to Abraham, blessing I will bless you. Yes, and multiplying I will multiply your seed, as the stars is the heaven, and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your seed will possess the gate of their enemies. It is time for the great nation birthing process to take place. But the question remains, has not been answered yet. What exactly will it take to make you let go of your Egypt? And what do you think it will take for others, people who are not like you, who don't even have the specifics of the calling upon your DNA the way you do? What will it take for them to join you and do the same and let go of their Egypt as well? That brings us to a time for our call to worship. I will sing this in Hebrew. Join me if you can. If not, just listen, and hopefully your spirit will be awakened by the sound of these Hebrew blessings that come forth. And hopefully your mind will follow suit as we go on. Are you ready? Baruch Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vayed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai noten haTorah. And now may you open our eyes, O Holy One, that we may see wondrous things in your Torah. For we are but strangers in the earth, so do not hide your commandments from us. For your Torah is a lamp to our feet and a light unto our paths. Context. What is the context of this whole story, this bow, this idea of transitioning, getting out of the inertia? We're near the end of last week's parsha at Va'era, after the hailstorm. Pharaoh sent and he called for Moshe and Aaron. This is our context as we start. Pharaoh had sent and called for Moshe and Aaron, and he said to them at that time, Tati hapa'am, I have sinned. This is a strange thing for a Pharaoh to say. Remember, he said he did not know the Holy One before this. You can't sin against someone you don't know or have a concept about. So he says, Hatati hapa'am, I have sinned. And he says further, then he describes who the Holy One is righteous. And my people and I are wicked. You have to recognize there's something that's taken place. There's an understanding that has entered Pharaoh's heart by virtue of the first 7 of these negaim, these 7 surgical strikes, these 7 touches that are designed to disarm. Now the Pharaoh knows enough about the Holy One to say, I have sinned, and my people and I are wicked. But the Holy One, everything he does is righteous. Oh yeah, Pharaoh now knows. This was his choose life or choose death point. This is his pivot point. He will not bow. He will not change. He will not transition. He says, though, he will. He says he will. He declares he will. Entreat the Holy One, he says, that there may be no more thundering and hail, for it is enough. It is enough. And I will let you go, he says, and you will stay no longer. That was what he said at the end of Parsha Va'era. Will he follow through? Will his actions correspond with his deeds? Will what he knows change what he does? This is the challenge. But there can be no more lo yadati Adonai. I don't know the Holy One. This was going to be a matter of ignorance, no more. Pharaoh's long-awaited moment of clarity had come. Hopefully all who read this story and might think they were in the position of Pharaoh will also have this moment of clarity by reading these passages before it lead up to this. By now, at this time, Pharaoh and everyone else who's been reading knows exactly what Pharaoh has to do. He promised to do it. He knows what to do. He asked no questions. He said there was no fine print. He says, I will let you go and you will stay no longer. No caveats, no fine print. This was his eighth and his best chance. He had had 7 previously. Now he knows for sure what's going on, and he's going to make his decision. So the very last words of Parsha Va'era were, they told us that when Pharaoh saw the rain and the hail and the thunder were completed, he added to and harvested his transgressions. He didn't do what he said he was going to do. He added to and he harvested his transgressions. And he and his servants put great weight and glory on their own hearts, their own wills. And with that such a strengthened heart, Pharaoh would not send out Bnei Israel, though he had promised he would do so. And the Pharaoh did exactly what the Holy One had told Moshe he was probably going to do. Well, if we look at this process of bowing, getting out of this process as part of the birth process, nation birthing process, the corresponding analogy would be that Egypt's water just broke. The water is broken, and now the final throes of labor are upon us, and there is no stopping the birth process. Now, this great nation is going to come out. Welcome to the active labor phase of the birth pangs of Egypt, which are predictive, which are prototypical of the birth pangs of the end of the times. From this point on in the narrative, the contractions are going to become increasingly intense and painful. The trauma will seem to be increasing, but it's all about bringing forth the birth of the great nation. Internally, on the physical side, there will be dilation. This is like a birth canal. There will be dilation, effacement, cramps, nausea, and a feeling of building intense pressure. And then it will also have its emotional effect. On the emotional side, the internal side, there will be panic, a sense of loss of control, a sense of physical exhaustion and overwhelm, and a growing desire on the part of the mother, being Egypt in this situation, to push. That's what we're going to see take place. The way the Holy One has Moshe and Aaron talk to and deal with Pharaoh is also going to turn sharply toward the severe. We have to make it clear. As Yohanan, John, and Yeshua spoke to the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Herodians as he was trying to get them to the point where he would be crucified on the Passover day at the appointed time, he had to start speaking more and more harshly to them. And he did. He did that in order to make the plan come to fruition at the appointed time. So it will be with Moshe, Aaron, speaking to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians. The harshness will come. It's not because of hate. It's not because of anger. It's not because of self-righteousness. It is because the timing needs to be handled correctly. And they need to be pushed on discomfort. In the same manner as Yeshua and Yohanan spoke harshly to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Herodians, and when it was getting close to time for them to do what they had to do, send out the people, Moshe and Aaron will now start to speak to Pharaoh, and they'll do so with increasing directness. and with increasing severity. And you'll see it in the text, and they'll bring the expulsion about at the appropriate time. The opening aliyah of this week starts like this. Again, I will read it in Hebrew because your spirit understands Hebrew. Your mind may not, and so your mind will have to follow. So to help your mind get in contact with your spirit, with your neshama, with your nishmat ha'im, what I'll do is I'll follow the Hebrew phrasing with an English translation that I have come up with. So it starts like this. Are you ready? Listen. Shema Yisrael. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Bo et Pharaoh. And the Holy One said to Moshe, come to Pharaoh. Ki ani hikbadeti et libo ve'et lev avodav. For I have made his and his servants' hearts heavy with pride. Lema'an shiti atotai ele becherbo. In order that I may demonstrate my signs before him. Ul ma'an tesafer be'azne bincha. So that you may tell in the hearing of your son. Uvein bincha et asher hitatalati be'mitzrayim. The things, and the ears of your son and your son's son, the mighty things that I have done in Egypt. Va et atoti asher sumti bam. And my signs, which I have performed among them. V'yadatim ki ani Adonai. That you will yada know that I am the Holy One. V'yavo Moshe v'Aaron el Paro. And so Moshe and Aaron went to Pharaoh. V'yomru elai. And they said to him, Ko amar Adonai Elohe ha'ivrim. The Holy One, God of the Hebrews, says this. Ad matai ma'aneh ta la'anot mipaneh. How long? Ad matai ma'aneh. Will you refuse to humble yourself? Will you refuse to humble yourself before my face? Shalach ami ve'ya'avduneh. Let my people go. Send my people out that they may serve me. Well, that's how the parsha begins. You see, there's a change in the atmosphere. There's a change in the attitude. The point of clarity has come. Pharaoh has now chosen not to do what he said he was going to do, not to let his activities, his actions line up with his confession. And therefore, what's going to happen is the Holy One knows how to finish this story. And the language gets harder. So we're going to have certain things, and I want to go so that we don't run out of time. I want to get to the end of the story first, and we'll talk back at the verse of the story later. Because one of the most important things that we have is at the end of this story is to teach us about something that makes us who we are, and that is Hag HaMatzah, the feast of the unleavened bread, and Erev Pesach, or Passover and unleavened bread are going to become part of the essence of our identity. They are essential remembrances. They are essential commemorations. They form a part of our DNA and our mission and our purpose. They are part of the story we're supposed to tell and the way of the Holy One we're supposed to keep reciting in the hearing of the nations and of our children. So we're going to have at the end of the Parsha, the Holy One will institute the annual celebration of Hag, or Festival HaMatzah, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And also Moshe is going to gather the elders, and he's going to instruct them about the mitzvot of the very first Erev Pesach, the evening of the Passover, that's going to take place in Egypt. We're not going to do everything that they did. That's not part of the commemoration, but we're to remember and tell our children about everything that they did on that first Passover evening, the evening of the death of the firstborn. And Moshe is going to give us instructions about future Passovers, future era of Pesachs. There are certain things we are supposed to do. There are certain aspects of things, that part of our story, that we are supposed to tell every Passover. And if anyone tells you that's been done away with, heaven help them. Heaven help them. This is part of the identity of the people of the living God, the covenant. Well, the next thing that's going to happen toward the end of the parsha is that the actual events of the first Pesach, not just what was supposed to happen, but what did happen, are going to be recited. We're going to have the story of what happened and how it all was. And we're supposed to get the feeling of what it was like to be in Egypt that night, both in our houses and to understand what was happening in other people's houses, and in the houses of the people where the firstborn had died all suddenly at one time, every firstborn across the nation, to feel the pain, to understand the hurt, understand the confusion, the disorientation, and never to feel, to have no feeling, to be unsympathetic toward other people. And then we will have, in the last part of the parsha, the narrative of the great departure. We will have this moment of actually leaving, of stepping foot out of the land of Egypt, headed out of Ramses all the way to Sukkot, with 600,000 Hebrew men plus women plus children plus a great mixed multitude from all the nations, all moving out together. From the heaven it must have looked like maybe an invasion of insects, all at one time, a great mass migration heading across at one time into the desert. That great departure narrative, get a capture in your heart the sense of excitement and trust in the Holy One, and joy and delight, and yet somewhat not knowing what's in store for you ahead, but knowing that you have to go because this is the calling upon your life, and it's who you were born to be and what you were born to do. Well, then we have the Holy One's going to give us a set of instructions, mitzvot, directions, ways about handling future Passovers, Pesachs. And then he's going to clarify instructions for future feasts of unleavened bread, future Hagim Hamatzah. And then we're going to get, finally, discussion at the very end of the parsha about the special status we are to afford to the Bekora, the firstborn. And it may help you to remember, as we get ready to do that and think about this, that it all goes back to Exodus 4, 22, 23. At the burning bush, when the Holy One was introducing himself to Moshe, he said, among the things that Moshe was to say to Pharaoh is, Israel is Beni Bechori. He is my son, my firstborn. Israel is Beni Bechori, my son, my firstborn. If you don't understand that, you understand why the firstborn is part of the Passover celebration, and remembering the firstborn and doing special things with regard to the firstborn of man and animals, because the firstborn is Israel, and we are Israel. So let my go, in the other part of this, Israel is Beni Bechori, he said to tell Pharaoh, and then to tell him also, let my son go, that he may serve me. That's why we do the special things with regard to the firstborn animals. Let them go so they may serve the Holy One. Well, the Passover, Pesach, becomes our shared point of national origin. This is what makes us, the first part of what makes us who we are. There are many things that we're going to add to that the Torah is going to tell us about later, but it starts here, the shared point of national origin. In Exodus 12, 14, 26 through 27, the Holy One's going to speak, and he's going to say, this day of Passover is to be for you a memorial, a zikaron, a remembrance, a calling to mind, and you are to cherish and guard it as an appointed time for the Holy One. This is a meeting. It's not just a celebration like a holiday the world has, not just some sort of special observance like the other religions have. This is a meeting with the Creator of the universe, an appointed meeting with the Creator of the universe. We're supposed to do it every year, throughout our generations. He says, throughout your generations, L'dor v'dor, an everlasting ordinance, a hukat olam, a hukat aulam, an everlasting, never to stop, nothing's to stop it. Again, I say, if anyone tells you this is done away with, or you shouldn't do this, or this shouldn't be part of who you are, part of the essence of what you project to the world and tell the world, heaven help them. He says further, when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? You see, this is about us passing on the torch, the baton, and the memory, and the DNA truth to our children. When your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? You are to say, we're given a script. It is the Pesach, or the Passover surrogate approach to the Holy One, who passed over the houses of Bnei Israel in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians. But he delivered our households and brought us out. Well, let's talk a little bit then about the specific words of the Pesach commemoration. Hebrew The language says it this way. The Holy One's speaking. And this day will be to you a day for remembrance, an act of commemoration and calling to the forefront of your mind. Hukat olam tekaguhu. You are to celebrate, make it a festival as an ordinance forever. It goes on. 7 days you are to eat matzah. This is part of our identity. 7 days every year, beginning in a certain time in this month. 7 days you are to eat matzah. On the first day you are to remove seor, the leavening agents, from your houses. For whoever eats chametz, anything that's leavened, from the first day to the seventh day, that person will be karat from Israel. They will not have a part in the identity and the mission and the calling, because they have forsaken the very basic, most basic identity factor of who we are and what story we're supposed to tell. It goes on. On the first day, it's a mikra kodesh. It's a prophetic rehearsal of things to come. A mikra, holiness infused. Kodesh, mikra kodesh. It is a time when we prophetically rehearse a great story of redemption. And also on the seventh day. The first and the seventh days are both mikra kodesh, rehearsals of this holiness factor, this release of kedusha upon the earth. No ordinary work, he says. No manner of ordinary work is to be done on these days. Only what must be done to have people eat, that may be prepared for you. It goes on a little later. It says, from the first moon cycle of the 14th day of that moon cycle. From the first moon cycle, he's going to tell us in chapter 12 where that first moon cycle is. From the first moon cycle that we count as a nation, not as human beings in some other form, but as a nation. From the first moon cycle, on the 14th day of that moon cycle, at evening, we are to eat matzah, and we're to keep eating matzah until the 21st day of the moon cycle at evening. 7 days of special eating what we will eat. For 7 days, some of the things we will not eat. No seor. No seor is no leavening agents are to be found in your houses. So we have to clean out our houses, and we make sure that there's none in our houses. And since whoever eats chametz, this is the reason, because whoever eats chametz, eats the leavened things, his nefesh, his will, and his mind, his emotions are set apart. They're different than the edah, the witness throng of Israel. Israel is said to be a witnesses, and you're not witnessing if you're not doing this process. There's supposed to be an idea of breaking free, breaking out of the resistance. This is the bow factor. We testify to the fact that we bow whenever we do what he says to do. This is a stark testimony, a sharp evidence of who we are. And he says that this is to take place. We are to do these things whether we are a ger, whether a person is a ger, a stranger, a foreigner, someone who's outside the covenant, or whether one's native born in the land. This is so serious to part of who we are. So we need to understand that there are certain ways in which the Holy One wants us to be a separate and distinct nation. We are not to look like the rest of the world. We're not to be bound by what they're bound by. We're not to be excited about what they're excited about. We're not supposed to be afraid of what they're afraid of. We're not supposed to be angry and outraged about what they're angry and outraged about it. Watch yourself. Take a deep breath. When you hear news media or you hear people talking and they're all upset and they're all angry and they want you to be upset and share their anger and share their fear and share their hatred of somebody else or share their blame of somebody else. Stop what you're doing. That's not who you are. We have a higher calling. We must remain calm and stay focused upon the mission to which we are called. So here's the key. Either we will join the Holy One, co-labor with him to set us apart, or the most antagonistic people of the nations will set us apart. And that will not be good for you or for them. Because you know what happens when people curse Bnei Israel, the people of the covenant? They themselves fall under the curse. So, what is it exactly that sets us apart from the people and the nations that we are sent to testify of this great redemption and model this great way of the Holy One? What is to set us apart? How are we to be different than they are? Well, the Holy One's been setting us apart, making distinctions between us and Egypt, which is our birth mother, so to speak, all along. And at different times we've been given different distinctions. But I want to go further and tell you what these distinctions are for. The purpose of the reason he makes distinctions and causes us to be different than the rest of the world is not because he thinks we're somehow better than they are. It's because he wants a nation that is set apart from the world. That increases, the setting apart increases the ability of that nation to inspire as opposed to spread darkness, and to bring light as opposed to bring darkness, and to bring hope of redemption as opposed to bringing concern and angst and traumatic things about how bad the world is. He wants to set us apart because of the part we are supposed to play in his great mission of modeling hope, modeling light, modeling love, modeling the redemptive plan. Second thing is to clearly reveal that our identity is not and cannot be defined by, nor can our citizenship be said to be of, nor can our allegiance to any of this world's nations, any of its cultures, any of its socioeconomic classes, any of its ethnic groups, any of its institutions, any of its movements. We are not that. We are something altogether unique and different. And if we're not, then we have not bowed. Well, I want to kind of talk about the marks that we're supposed to bear. We won't have time to get too deep into the parsha of the locust and the parsha of the darkness and the parsha of the firstborn, death of the firstborn, the parsha of the leaving of Egypt, the departure from Egypt. Let's just talk about some of the marks that we're supposed, as a holy nation, as a nation that models the Yosephian, the ways of Yosef, and the Abrahamic to the world, as carries the light of the covenant into the world, and demonstrates how life on earth should be lived to its fullest. What are the marks of the Yosephians? Cain had a mark. The Yosephians, we as Yosephians, we of the people of the Holy One, are called to carry a mark as well. What is that mark? What are the aspects of that mark? First, we think of the mark that we're supposed to bear is we're supposed to be the gentle, meek, kind, and peaceable people. People of a gentle, meek, kind, and peaceable disposition, because there are more than enough people in the world who have the opposite, which is the heart of heart, the insightful, the spiteful, rhetoric people, the people who talk and get angry and get frustrated and rant and hate. That's not who we are. The first mark is we are drastically different from those people. Are you? Are you wearing the mark of the Yosephian, of the Yosef and Yeshua? One is the image of the other. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand who Joseph was, you can't really understand who Yeshua is and who you're called to be. So this gentle, meek mind, peaceable disposition is supposed to contrast with the heart of heart and insightful and spiteful rhetoric people. Secondly, the mark of the Yosephian, to be like Joseph or be like Yeshua, is to radiate light. The opposite. There's many people who do the opposite, which is to absorb and emit darkness, the energy, the dark energy of this world, of emotion, of appetite and urge and selfishness. There's a big distinction between radiating light and absorbing and emitting darkness. And the third Yosephian characteristic, or the mark of it, is that we are free. Now, people think freedom means free to do what I want. Be careful. If you think that's what freedom means, understand that whatever you want now becomes your slave master. Your appetites, your urges, your desires, your beliefs, your opinions, they become your slave master. And boy, if you're slave to those slave masters, that is tyranny at its highest level. Freedom is not freedom to do what you want. Freedom is to do what you were made to do, what you were created to do, what is endemic to you, person you were designed to be. And freedom is not ability to think and believe and practice what you think you want to, what your religious conviction. That's not freedom. That's another form of bondage. Whatever you've been trained or whatever you've been indoctrinated to believe, think, practice, or do in religious forms or ideological forms, that's a bondage. That's the ultimate tyrant. Now the issue is, can you think, can you believe, can you act, can you engage in activities based upon what you were designed to be, what your character, your nature is designed by the Holy One. That's the issue of freedom. So we are a people whose mark is freedom, not bound by appetites and desires and sentiments and fears and ethnic and cultural and institutional biases and propaganda of the ages. We're not bound by that. We are free from that. The fourth mark of the Yosephian nation, the great nation that will build up to Messiah and will be following the footsteps of Messiah, is that we are voluntary, willing, and joyful servants of all. Voluntary, willing, and joyful servants of all. Slaves to none, but willing and voluntary and joyful servants to all. We have that mindset because there are so many in the world that have another mindset. A mindset that says they always demanding things. They want more. They're covetous. They're jealous. They're envious. They always want more. They demand more. They take. They're just takers. They're controlling. They're manipulating. They're deceptive. They want, and whatever it takes to get what they want, they will do. They will use people. They will abuse people. They will abuse things. This is who they are. That's the ones we are called to be the counterculture to. And how do we become that counterculture? We bear the mark of Joseph. Voluntary, willing, and joyful servants to all. And fifth, the next mark of the Yosephian nation, great nation that builds into Messiah and demonstrates Messiah's ways, is that we remember what it's like to be a stranger, to be poor, to be a slave, to be a prisoner, to be an outsider, to be mocked, to be hated. We remember what that's like, and we don't hold grudges about that. We have sentimentality. We have a sense of sympathy and a sense of understanding of others, as opposed to the rest of the world, which takes what they have and feels entitled to it, or feels entitled to more. And they use this entitlement mentality to live a life that they consider to be a privileged way. We are entitled to these things. We should get these things. You shouldn't have them. We do. That's what the other side of the world does. The mark of the Yosephian is we know what it's like. We remember, because of these stories, what it's like to be a stranger, a slave, an outsider, a poor person, an abused or mocked person. Now, specifically, as we go forth, the Torah is going to give us more and more ways in which we are to be distinct from the world. This is what the mitzvot section of Torah are all about, and we're about to enter as we get past Parsha Bo into Beshalach and all into Yitro and the next sets of Parsha. We're going to get a bunch of instructions specifically that are supposed to carefully divide us up from the world, make us look distinctive from the world, so that we can carry the Kedusha, carry the energy of the Holy One without the trappings, without the bindings of the world and its mindsets, or the flesh and its mindsets. We will have purity to be able to do that. This is what these mitzvot are all about. This is not about something you earn some sort of favor with the Holy One. This is about how you reflect His glory, and so we will take that. The first thing that we're going to learn is about the kingdom calendar. And now it's different than the calendars of the nations. We'll learn about the Sabbath. We'll learn about the Moedim, the different days. They're not like the rest of the world has holidays, and they have special commemorations of historic events. We instead have meetings with our Creator where we surrender to Him and we re-up on our commitment to Him. And He speaks over our lives in ways that empower and infuse us with Kedusha again and cleanse us of all these junk that we've accumulated between the special meetings. So those Sabbaths and the Moedim, the festivals as people like to call them. And then there's the idea of how we reckon days. We don't reckon days like the rest of the world. They figure a day from sunrise to sunset, or from midnight. I don't know where they got that, from midnight to midnight. That's how the world recognizes days. We don't do that. We follow the kingdom's way, the way in which is specified in the creation story. From sunset to sunset, there was evening, there was morning, and the two combined, when you put the two together, that makes a day. We reckon days in that manner. It changes the whole focus of life. Thirdly, we reckon the moons, the months, different than the world. The months in some of the world are based upon solar calendar, and they really have no basis at all. You don't know when the moon is going to be. A month comes from the word moon, but they have nothing to do with the moon. But in our way of thinking, everything has to do with the moon. The sighting of a new moon is the Kodesh, is the beginning of a season of a new outlay of Kedusha. We're supposed to walk in that Kedusha. And then the reckoning of years. Our calendar calls us to reckon years, beginning with the month of barley in the field. And that is because that is when we had this event. The rest of the world uses other things to start their years. Um, Initially, I think man probably followed the creation calendar, as I call it. Man was created, it's believed, on the sixth day of creation, obviously, and that was the beginning point of the first year. So the years, the moons, the months began to be counted from that day of man's creation. And that was the creation calendar, but eventually cultures have developed of men that were far away from even recognizing creation, and they put gods, false gods, idols in place of God. And they came up with their own way of calculating the years. And so the Egyptians had a festival where the creation, their fertility god and goddess, were involved in that process, and they had a festival. They started their year with that festival, where the creation goddess, the new creation year. The Babylonians had something very similar. It's all about false gods and goddesses, and they started their years that way. Strangely enough, we've had this The Romans picked up, going back to close to where we were in the Hebrew calendar, but then they changed, and that's how the first they moved when the Julian calendar, and then into the Gregorian calendar. They really put the time starting the year back in January, which has no historical precedent whatsoever, other than that was the early Roman, the later Roman way of doing things. Matter of fact, it still belies the names of the months that we read. September, for instance. What is Sept is 7, is the number for 7, but yet it's the 9th month under this new Gregorian scheme that he developed here. So, and then October would be the 8th, but it's the 10th month. And so you see how they changed it, and now we think it's normal that the year begins in January, and it's totally foreign. It's all a matter of man's making stuff up in his head and then confusing and conflating the realities of life. We, as a Hebrew people, as a covenant people, are designed to go back to the reality of the timing of the Holy One as far as when times were made. We are to also overcome the obsession with eating, with stuffing our face, food obsession, fleshly food obsession. We are to have a kingdom diet that restricts. That's part of it has to do with what we do with the whole matzah and unleavened bread things that we're talking about, but also about we're going to have mitzvot later on that tell us things we just do not eat. We because if they tend to magnify the food obsession, things like the flesh of the swine, the bacon, the taste of it, the smell of it, the addictive nature of it tends to facilitate the food obsessions. Other things, shellfish and different types of food like that have these intense, strong tastes that tend to play to the food obsession and take away the spiritual mindset. The kingdom mindset, as opposed to the worldly mindset. The kingdom mindset involves appreciation of the purpose and the value of mortal life as being to co-labor with the Creator, not to do your own thing, not to fulfill a wish list or a bucket list, but to co-labor with the Creator in His plan. Bring about redemption, bring about restoration, bring about healing, bring about tikkun, not just attain self-will or goals, promotion goals or self-expression goals. I will kind of leave that with that. I want to say the question now becomes, we know what the Josephian marks are, the marks of Joseph, the marks of the kingdom, the marks of the king are these special set of national marks of distinction, these special marks that the Creator of the universe, our King, has designed to set us apart from all the other peoples of the world for the sake of and in furtherance of His grand redemptive plan. We now know what they are. The question is, who will take those marks? Who will bear those marks? Who will say, I am ready to bow? Well, Shabbat Shalom, beloved. Let us know you were here and any comments you might have. Blessings to you. We'll see you next week.